Whew. All right. Well, after a very long, let's get all this set up right, break, we're back. I'm running late again, of course. I'm late to being late. Hoping to start back up at 7:45 again here soon. But I was running behind, and then I forgot that I actually didn't have my camera stuff set up, or I didn't even remember what chapter we were in because it's been so long. I took a break for my voice, which was really needed to get my vocals back to where I wasn't in pain every time I sang and taught. But all that said, we were in Numbers chapter 15. And now we're back in Numbers chapter 15. And we're going to be starting in verse 22, where it says, if you sin unintentionally and do not observe all the things which the Lord has spoken to Moses, all the Lord has commanded by you by the hand of Moses from the day of the Lord going forward, right? Then it'll be, verse 24, if it is unintentionally committed without the knowledge of the congregation, the whole congregation shall offer a young bull. And so in verse 27, if a person sins unintentionally, then he shall bring a female goat. And they've got all this, again, one law for him who sins unintentionally, for him who is native born among the children of Israel, and for the stranger who dwells among them. And so at the end of the day, this is talking about unintentional sin. And unintentional might just be a convenient translation, because it's kind of hard to do things totally unintentionally. But it's going to be contrasted with verses 30 and 31. 30 and 31 says, but the person who does anything presumptuously. And presumptuously means defiantly, and literally it's with a high hand lifted high. And that's kind of the idea, is when you're doing something bold or making a proclamation, you raise your hand in the air and you said, this is what it's the idea of an actual rebellion. And so it says, he shall be cut off from among his people because he's despised the word of the Lord, has broken his commandment. That person shall be completely cut off. His guilt shall be upon him. That was a death penalty. And so David, when he sins by committing adultery with Bathsheba, he makes the statement, if you had wanted bulls, a sacrifice, I'd give them, but that's not what you desire. There is no sacrifice he could bring. He knows there's a broken heart and a contrite spirit. That is what the Lord wants from David. Because David had committed adultery, and there was no sacrifice for adultery. It was simply a death penalty. You don't accidentally do that. And so it's a good reminder, though, that God is very gracious with our unintentional sins that we commit every single day. That we get a behavior or an attitude or a thought or a feeling, and it's actually sinful. That deep down, there's stuff we do on a daily basis that it's sinful because it's not perfectly holy, right? It's not hitting God's perfect mark of perfection, and therefore it's a miss. And that's where we get the word sin from. As far as I understand or recall, sin is actually goes back to Old English, and it was the term for missing the bullseye in archery. If God's holy perfection is the bullseye and we miss that, it's sin. Well, then I should be doing all sorts of sin. Yeah, and that's kind of the idea. And God is very forgiving of that. The fact that every day little things happen, attitudes, thoughts, feelings. Now, the more we recognize these things as sin, the more God will actually work them out of our lives. If we ignore them and try and just disregard them, then we're going to continue on wrestling with these things. But then there's the presumptuous sin. Stuff that we know it's wrong, and we're going to go and do it anyway, with a rebellious attitude. That's where chastisement comes in. If we are God's kids, he will chastise us if we feel like we can just go and sin and have no consequence. And so we see that as an example in verses 32 to 36. Now, while the children of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man gathering sticks on the Sabbath. And those who found him gathering sticks brought unto Moses and all the congregation. They put him under the guard, and because it had not been explained what should be done to him. Then the Lord said to Moses, this man shall surely be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him with stones outside the camp. So as the Lord commanded Moses, all the congregation brought him outside the camp and stoned him with stones, and he died. Now, I think it goes to show, maybe it's not the phrase I wanted to use, but I think this is a good example. Not of the Sabbath and the Sabbath law, because he may be the only man who was ever actually stoned to death for gathering sticks. I don't know. But it's placed here in the Bible after verses 30 and 31 for a reason. I have a strong inclination to believe that if an elderly man who is just kind of a little aloof went out to gather sticks some morning, not realizing what day it was, and everyone caught him and it was a Sabbath, Lord, what should we do with this man? Let the poor guy alone. He was confused. Same action, but where was the heart at? I believe this man in verses 32 to 36, it wasn't a mistake, it wasn't a misunderstanding. He was sinning with a high hand. It was presumptuous sin. It was God has just given us the Sabbath law, but whatever, I don't care. I need sticks, so I'm going to go out and get some. Well, that's a totally different attitude there. And so it's a good reminder that we can commit the exact same actions, but the consequence could be very different because of where our hearts are at. Now, that doesn't mean that you can have your heart in the right place as you go commit adultery, but it's the idea that the heart of someone does really matter to God. Where is their heart at? Because it's, it's the heart that really sets our course. We should guard our hearts because from it proceeds all the issues of life, right? And so I'll save the last section for tomorrow. It'll be a small little section, and then we'll move on to the rebellion of Korah. But that's it for today. Just that idea of that there's unintentional sin that everyone commits all the time. And God has a way of forgiving that, right? There's intentional sin, which God is not going to just overlook. We should expect chastisement when there's intentional sin. And then we have this example of the man in the gathering of sticks to show us what it looks like when people sin intentionally, and that God, he's going to deal with that. So we need to remember that we are covered by the blood of Jesus, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to experience consequences for our actions, especially when we're doing stuff that we know we should never do. All right, God bless you guys. I'll see you tomorrow, 7:45 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on Facebook and YouTube. God bless. Oh, wrong button. That's why I got to kick over here.